Okay, gewaltig. So today is Yom Rishon to Parshas Balak. Zog to Heilige Gemara. V'loi nevrechas hakayvsin, we're on Bava Basra, that Yutas Amar Aleph. V'loi nevrechas hakayvsin. Zog to Gemara. Amar Rab Nachman, Amar Rabba Bar Hua, L'shonu ela min hamecham mitzam. The way they used to do laundry in those days, and I don't know how it worked, is they used to take a little bar and they used to put in it dog feces, let it ferment and really get smelly. And that was the solution in which they soaked the begodim. I guess that loosened up the stains. It probably smelled so bad that even the stains couldn't take it and had to run away. And then after that, they would transfer the beged into a rinse pit where they would shake it around and squeeze it, and that caused splashes. So in that pit, water would go flying further away. So therefore, loy shona, the 3 tefachim is adequate. Element of the chamtzon, avomin anajon. But if you have a pit that's much more active, where you're working with the begodim, so water will travel further. Dalat amas, you'd have to keep that pit 4 amas away from the property line. Tanya nami hochi, we learned as well. Nivreches hakayvsin, the washing pit or the soaking pit, is Dal Ramas. I V'hanam Tanan Gimel Tvachim. We learned in Amish's 3 Tvachim. Lav Shmami no could have Nachman that there is that distinction between which washing pit we're referring to, the rinsing pit versus the soaking pit. He could have there are those who presented the same information in a question and answer form. Tanan Nevrechas HaKoyvsin Gimel Tvachim. V'tanya Arbamis or Rav Nachman or Rabbi Bavu Lakasha Kanman and Machamton Kanman and Adja. Rav Chibur Rav Avya Masala Behedja. He just learned it straight out. The Mishnah is clear about what it's talking about. Ela imkain herchek misvas mechamtzon ula koshel yomel tvachim. So the Mishnah is clearly stating which pit it is that has to be only 3 tvachim away. That's the mechamtzon, but the minadjon, the one where the water moves around, there you'd have to maintain a larger distance. Zog to Gemara weiter. The sod b'sid. So this is the Shaila in the Mishnah. In the first case of the Mishnah, where it's talking about keeping your bar 3 tvachim away from his bar, or 6 tvachim away from the hole, is it oisad b'sitnan, or is it visad b'sitnan? So visad b'sitnan, oy dilma oisad b'sitnan. Do you have to do both? So I maintain 3 tvachim distance and reinforce your wall with sid, or is one or the other good? Zok Gemara, Pshita de Visad Bisitnan. In the ratio of Mishnah, it must be that not only must you maintain a distance, you also need Visad Bisit. The Yisal Gedaitach, the Oisad Bisitnan, if it's one or the other, Im Kain La'arvinu V'lisninu. There's a later case in the Mishnah that also says Visad Bisit. There it says Beferish. Oisad visid. So it's actually larvinu letarti bavi side the ratio and side the mitziasa. We could have mixed the ratio and the mitziasa into one case if they have exactly the same halacha. And in the mitziasa, we know for sure it's oisad visitnan. Elo midoloi arvinu. Since the cases weren't mixed into one, it must be because they have 2 different halachas. Shmamina the ratio visad visitnan. You need both. The meaning tarvayu harchaka visid. So that is the Gemara's attempted raya. Zog to Gemara, it's not a raya. Maybe the reason why they're not put into one halacha is because there's a distinction in categories in what type of damage can be caused by what you're doing in close proximity to his property line. The ratios are discussing things that caused moisture to damage the wall. That's one set of issues. And Seifa Sekadavla. In the Seifa, the concern is the heat that's coming from what you're placing there near as well. And since it's 2 different categories of possible damages, it therefore has a separate case. Good morning, Rab Shimon. I'm sorry, I'm learning Daf Yud test now, even though I should be learning Daf Yud test, because yesterday in Shul, I instructed Mintzberg by mistake to learn today's Daf Yud test. But this is a very easy, short daf. I'm hoping afterwards we can still go back the Chazer Yudches or to learn Yudches, which Mintzberg didn't teach yesterday. But I apologize for the mix-up. Zog to Gemara. I can't hear Shimon because you're muted, but I could see you.
Is Yud is it recorded?
Yudches is recorded.
Have you done it?
Yes, I did Yudches
You
last
did
night.
it last night?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
so
okay,
it is available on
so
YouTube.
I can always go back to that as well. All
okay,
right.
and at 9 o'clock, I'm for sure going to do Yudches because there most of the oilam also would have done it yesterday in shul.
All right. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, well, I was going to do Yudches now, but what happened was Gary came first, or Yitzchak came first, and he wasn't shul yesterday, so I figured we'll do Yudches because he did Yudches by himself.
Okay, but at 9 o'clock you're doing it today. Okay.
Yes.
All right, very good. Shkoyach.
Thank you. Zog Tehel Gemara, Toshma. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Sel Habab Yadayim. What if, unlike in our Mishnah's case, where you had to dig a hole to make a bar, it was very soft sand, and it's very easy to remove the sand with your hands. So the loch is Zeh Chayfer Boyer Mikan. He will dig his bar here. V'Zeh Chayfer Boyer Mikan, and he'll dig his bar here. Zeh Mach Gimel Tvachim V'Sad Besid. V'Zeh Mach Gimel Tvachim V'Sad Besid. Now, this is a unique case where you're dealing with soft earth, so you will definitely need more in the way of reinforcement. So Taima, you know why it's V'Sad Besid in the case of very soft earth? The Baba Yadayim, because it's very soft earth, very soft soil. Sand-like. Haloi Baba Yadayim. But in a regular case of a bar, Haloi, you wouldn't need that extra reinforcement. So you have a riot once again that it's Oy Sad Besid. So that Gemara, no, Huadin, the Afagav, the Loi Baba Yadayim, Nami Sad Besid. Maybe even if it was Loi Baba Yadayim, you also need both. So why is this brisa telling us a case in a case of Sad Besid? What chiddush is it? Pashas, we thought the chiddush is that you need both over here. No, you don't need both. Uba b'yadayim is trichale. So kedai chamino. I apologize. Here you do need Sad Besid, but it's not a special requirement by Baba Yadayim. Maybe for every bar you need Sad Besid. So what unique halacha are we learning about a case of Baba Yadayim, about a case of soft soil? Baba Yadayim is trichalei. So that we not keeping the Baba Yadayim liboy raf chotfei. I would have thought without the brisa that if it's very soft earth, not only do I have to keep a distance of three tvachim and Sad Besid, maybe I have to be even further away. Kamash Malon, that even though it's soft earth, 3 tvachim is still enough, but you don't have a raya about the Sad Besid. Zok Gemara. Kamash Malon. Machikin is a gefes, v'es a zevel, v'es a melech, v'es a sloim. All of these items have to stay far away from your neighbor's wall. Zok Gemara. Tanan Hosam. We learned in Hilchos Shabbos. We know you're not allowed to be toimin, you're not allowed to bury a pot in something that is moishev hevel, in a substance that is moishev hevel, that adds heat. And therefore, the brisa there the Mishnah there gives us a list of what items are moishev hevel, what insulators are moishev hevel, and therefore one may not be toimin in them, and what items are ein moishev hevel. Gemara is making an assumption that all of the items listed in our Mishnah which damage walls because of heat must be considered much of hevel. So Tanan Hosam, Bamet Toimnin, Ubamet in Toimnin, Ein Toimnin, Loy Begefes, Veloy Bezevel. So far, it's the same list as our Mishnah. Veloy Bemelach, again the same as our Mishnah. Veloy Besid. But here, the Mishnah in Shabbos departs from our Mishnah and says Veloy Bechoil, not with sand, Bein Lachin, Bein Yeveshin, whether the sand is moist or dry. So the problem here is a twofold problem. In our Mishnah, it mentions nothing about choil being something that's moishev hevel, and therefore must be distance from your friend's wall. On the other hand, over there, it doesn't say sloim, which our Mishnah includes, as something that's moishev hevel. So therefore, why is that not included in the Mishnah of Shabbos to be prohibited from making a tmona in sloim? So Zok Gemara, Ma'ishna Hacha Dekatani Shloim, Veloy Katani Choil, U'Ma'ishna Hostam Dekatani Choil, Veloy Katani Shloim. Amr Yosef, Zok Yosef. Levisha Ein Darkon, Shel B'nei Adam, Lahatman B'Shloim. Technically, Shloim are Moshev Hevel. but it's not the derech. People don't normally use sloim. That's why it doesn't mention sloim in the parsha or in the sugya of Shabbos. I'm sorry, that's in Sheidak Shalom happened to Sloim. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye asked, the Chidakin shall b'nei Adam lahatman begizei tzemer. Are you telling me that the Rabbanon don't mention Sloim there, even though it's technically Aser to Moshe Hevel, but since people are not toimin in Sloim? I'm going to show you that the Mishnah does discuss items, even items that are not usually used for Atmana. The Mishnah still saw the need to discuss it. People are normally not going to use wool as items of Atmana, yet the Bryce does directly address those. The Tanya Toinin begizet Tzemer, uvetzipet Tzemer, uvelshonish shalagaman, uvemuchen. These are all cotton type of products that are not the derech to be toimin in. Yet the Bryce saw the need directly to address those. You're not allowed to carry them around because they're muksa. So Oibezo, your svara why Sloim wasn't mentioned in Shabbos as one of the items that's us to be timing in, and your svara was because it's not usual to do it, so the Tanya doesn't talk about it, is not valid, because you see the Tanya does talk about things even that are not commonly used. That's one pshat. Tosfos has another mechudesh pshat, that since it's an uncommon thing, since it's uncommon to make atma b'sloim, in fact, then it will be mutter lechatchila to do. And Tosfos says the svara is, when do the Rabbanan make a takana? The whole issue of atmana is only, it's a gzeira, you might light a fire to heat it up. But otherwise, I mean, deraisa wouldn't be also. So when do the Rabbanan engage to make a takana? By something that can commonly occur. But something that's so rare to occur, such as atmana b'sloim, it's not even also. And if you look at the Tosfos at the side, I'd rather show it to you inside. You don't have to take my word for it. Rashi says, Tosfos says, in my Tosfos, if you look at the top of the Rebbeinu Gershom, there's like a little crown. And right opposite that crown, Tosfos says, the kivin de la shlicha hi klal, since it never happens, it's very rare to have someone make a hatmana in rocks, shori lahatman ban, it's even mutter. The b'milsa de la shlicha loy gazru b'hu. If something's not common to be done, the Rabbanan don't even address such a case. V'chein minig shalanu, and that is our minig shalanu hagin lahatna b'sloyim she'esh yotzman she'korin kailish. We do make atmana in flintstones. So Tosfos is telling us that his minig then was then, I don't know what halacha l'mais is, but the minig then was they made atmana, even though it's something that was Moshe Hevel, but it's something that the Rabbanan were in goyzer on because it's such an uncommon type of thing. So let's go back to our Gemara, because our Gemara is dealing with a shaila. Why doesn't it mention in the parsha of Shabbos or the Mishnah of Shabbos? Why doesn't it mention that Sloim are not, you can't make atmana with them? So the Gemara tried saying, because the Mishnah doesn't discuss uncommon things, but the problem is the Mishnah in fact does discuss uncommon things because it's meforish l'gabe the atmana in l'shon shel argamon and gizei tzemer. So therefore, the Gemara has to abort this teretz and have a different teretz. El Amar Abaye. You know why it lists choil over there and not sloim, and it lists sloim over here and not choil, is because Yagid Olav Reil. Its friend will tell us what we need to know. So, in other words, here it mentions sloim, so we'll say that applies to Shabbos as well. By Shabbos it's choil, which will apply to us as well. That's what the Gemara says. Yagid Olav Reil. That is as far. Tana Hacha Sloim, by us it mentions Sloim, by us in Bava Basra. But of course Choil as well, which we learn from Shabbos. Tana Hasan Choil, there it's at Choil, V'hu Adin L'Sloim. Amalei Rava, Frank Rava, that's not a good teretz. Because he Yagid Olav Reil, why do we have the information dispersed? Choil is there, and Sloim is here. Pack all the information into one place. List Ninulakulu Bechada. List of all of the things that you have to have our chaka from in Bava Basra, or a list of all of the things that you're not allowed to be matin with in Shabbos. The list and only one of the items should be listed in the other place. And we will know that everything that applied in one place applies in another place because of the concept of Yagid Alav Reyai. So Rava says it's not mistaber to say Yagid Alav Reyai if you have some items here and some items there. That's not a good application of Yagid Alav Reyai. Yagid Alav Reyai is all the information would only be in one place. And in the other place, it hints towards that same concept, so then you'll import all the other things. So we have a huge problem. Ella Amarava Alta Yupshat. Why by Shabbos it mentions Choil and not Sloim, and why by Bava Basra it mentions Sloim and not Choil. Amarava Hasamanu Taima, Palai Katani Sloim, Mishum de Mishtachile. Look there, it ruins the pot. And Vivalta ruins the pot, therefore it's never going to happen. It's not that it's rare, it's never going to happen. So it's not relevant. You know why I didn't mention Choil over here? Because Choil isn't like any other davar Moshe Hevel. It's dimech time. If you warm up the sand, it will stay hot. That's why it's usher by Shabbos. But if you put something cold into it, it's not going to be Moshe Hevel. Here we're talking about just piling it up in your property. It's not going to damage the wall because it's not going to retain heat. But if you're putting a hot pot into it, which is this discussion in Shabbos, there it's going to be a problem about them. Gemara, Vatani Rabbi Shia, Choil. Rabbi Shia in our sugya does say Choil. According to your svara, Choil is misapplied over here. Choil doesn't belong over here. Choil wouldn't cause a problem here. So Gemara, you know why Rabbi Shia included Choil in his list of the halachas of our Mishnah? Hasnan b'masuna. It's not placed in the category of heat. It's placed in the category where it was discussing moisture, like an amas hamayim, and we're talking about wet sand. So why didn't our Tana do the same thing? She should have listed Chayil as well and placed it in the category that discusses damage caused by moisture. So because we already know about moisture. Amas hamayim. We have already a category of moisture called amas hamayim, so we would be able to on our own figure out that wet sand would also be prohibited to store near your friend's property line. Are you telling me that the Mishnah only gives one example of each thing? Yet there's nevrechas akaivsim there as well, which shouldn't be much different in the amas hamayim. No, in fact, I would not know one without the other. If I have amas hamayim, I would know oil, wet sand, but I wouldn't know nevrechas akaivsim or vice versa. Titona amas hamayim. If the Mishnah only listed off amas hamayim that you're not allowed to have near your friend's property line, mishum de kavia, an amas hamayim is something that's there permanently. It's almost a natural type of feature. It's like water running through a brook. So over time, it's going to cause erosion of someone's wall. Which is a pit that you're making to wash clothing in, that could easily be relocated. It's far from permanent. The loy kavia, maybe that wouldn't be a problem, and that's why the Mishnah must mention nevrechas akaivsim. On the flip side, if you tell nevrechas akaivsim, I would have said mishum dekavu v'kaimi. They're gathered there together. It's sitting water, and that will seep in and cause problems. Avos hamayim, which is rushing water, it's not stationary. Maybe that wouldn't seep in and cause damage in the soil. Loy. So therefore, tzricha, that's why the Mishnah to mention both of them. But choil, we don't need to add, because between nevrechas akaivsim and avos hamayim, it covers choil, which is a wet, sticky sand. You can't plant, you can't plow near someone else's kosel. Why does the Mishnah have to list off Zroim and Machresha? Zroim typically means Machresha. How are you going to plant seeds? Because you only can plant seeds if you first plow. So why do I need a separate category of Zroim? Anytime I'm going to want to plant, I'll have to bring the machresha there first. I'll have to plow first, and therefore it should be outlawed because I'm not allowed to plow there. Zok Gemara, I'll tell you why. But mapoilis yad, we're talking about mapoilis yad, meaning I'm just throwing some seeds down with my hand, which we normally do not do a full plowing for. So you have a chetimsa where you would be planting without plowing, and that's what the Mishnah is talking about when it said zroim. Frank Gemara, machresha, v'tepek lebishum zroim. Who is going to plow? Someone who plants to plant. we've already said that any planting is going to be osir. So why do I have to have a separate category of machresha? By default, it's going to be osir because of this roim. So no, not all plowing is to seed. Sometimes you plow around the tree to loosen up and aerate the soil, and that's what you're plowing for, and that's why a Mishnah has to list off you're not allowed to plow even for ilanos. Tomorrow, the type of clay mishumaya. We already know that the problem of any of these things is you have to water it. Since any time you plant, you're going to have to water it. The kasha is, why did it list the category of zroim? The category of zroim shouldn't be necessary because we know that you're not allowed to put too much water near your friend's property line, and when you're going to be planting, you're going to be watering something. So, correct the Gemara, why do we need a separate category of zroim if any zroim will always also include the problem of water? Zok the Gemara, Tana Beretz Yisrael Kai. We're talking about an Yisrael where you don't have to water it at all. Yechsiv limtar hashamayim tishtamayim. The rain will be enough to deal with it. You don't have to add any water that you're watering it with, and therefore it's a chechatim of zroim without the problem of mayim. Correct the Gemara. You have a problem with planting. Why do you have a problem with planting? If you're planting, you're not in his wall, you're where you're planting. The only reason why there would be a problem with planting is because its roots are going to spread and it's going to get underneath the wall, and then maybe the moisture or the roots or whatever it is going to cause damage to the wall. But you only could say it's a problem if you're going to learn that roots spread. Are you telling me that when things grow, the roots spread all around? Let's turn on to Amud Beis. I'm going to show you otherwise. But now we learned hamavrich es a gefen ba'aretz. Now the halacha is that you're not allowed to plant zroim in a kerem, but in order for a kerem to be considered a kerem, it has to have at least 5 vines. What if you only had 1 vine? So now you're allowed to plant zroim all around it because it won't be called klai kerem because in fact it's not a kerem. However, there are still some restrictions. And what happens if someone took this kerem? He took not this kerem, he took this vine, and he took one of the branches from the vine without disconnecting it, bent it down, made it go under the earth, go horizontally under the earth a couple of feet, and then come back up. So basically what we're trying to do is create a second vine. So what if someone did that? Hamavrich es a gefen ba'aretz. Now, when I have this horizontal branch that I have running under the ground, how deeply buried was it? So the Mishnah makes a distinction. What if I didn't put it so deep into the ground? It's within 3 tvachim of the surface. Lo yavi zera. You're not allowed to directly plant zera on it. And Rashi says, even though it won't be klaya kerem technically, because they don't have a kerem, you only have 1 plant. But if you plant right over it, we're afraid the roots are going to grow down into that branch that's underneath the ground and penetrate that branch and grow together, and that will be a problem of klayim. So therefore, if the branch is within 3 tvachim of the surface of the earth, lo yavi zera, don't plant zera on top of it. Vatani Allah, however, if it's deeper than that, we're not worried because the zera of the that you're going to plant won't penetrate 3 tvachim down. Frankly, more of a Tanya, we learned even though you can't plant right over it, you could plant right beside it. Now, if you're going to plant right beside it, if the roots only go straight down in this area, then you don't need to worry. It won't penetrate that branch underneath the ground. But if it grows in either direction, which is what it's mashma like from our Gemara, that's why you have to stay far away, 3 tvachim away. So then, in the case of Klayim as well, you shouldn't be able to be Zereyes Atstodin Elech ve'elech like the Mishnah says. You should have to be further away. I'm sorry, Omar Abchana b'Shem Reb Yosy, you're right. Itaka only grows down and it doesn't grow to the side, and that's why by climate it's going to be mutter. Oibazoy, you're going to ask me, so why is it a problem planting near someone's wall? Why is there an issue? The roots are minding their own business. They're staying in their place, in their footprint. Teretz is, it softens up as the roots are penetrating the ground. It softens the whole ground, and it's going to cause the ground to become sandy and loosen up, and it'll destroy the foundation of that wall. And that's why it's also, even though the roots aren't actually going there. Gewaltig. Rashi says in the fourth skinny line, it's going to soften the earth, not underneath the wall, but near the wall where these items, these roim, are planted. It'll cause sand to come up, it'll display sand, and that will have an impact even on the soil that the wall is on and mess up the wall. Gewaltig. Your urine, you're not allowed to have urine within 3 tvachim of a wall. So when we learned the Mishnah, we touched it that you're not allowed to urinate there. Now we're going to see that's not necessarily true. Zogt the Heilige Gemara. Amar Rabba bar Avchana, muter la'odam lahashtin mayim b'tzat koisle shel chavemer. One is allowed to relieve himself beside, not on the wall, beside the wall of his friend. How do I know that? How do I know that it's a normal thing for people to relieve themselves near someone's wall? Dichsiv, v'hechresi la'achov, I'm going to destroy completely Achav's whole malchus, even mashtin bekir, even a person who's going to clandestinely relieve himself near the wall or on the wall, v'otzer v'ozav v'Yisrael, any abandoned person, everyone's going to be destroyed. So you see clearly that people do that. So if people do that, then that's what's going to be usher. I'm sorry, that must be mutter, because if it was usher to do, why would the pasuk mention that someone's a mashon bekir if that's usher to do? So it must be mutter, and that was Rabba bar Chana's right. Frank Gemara, but the problem is we know you're not allowed to do that from our Mishnah. How could Rabba bar Chana say something that contradicts the Mishnah? So when our Mishnah says you can't have meraglaim within 3 tefachim, it doesn't mean one person taking an individual relief. What it means is he had an ovet shel meraglaim. He had a container that many people used, so now you have a full bucket of meraglaim that you're not allowed to dump out near a wall. Toshma. Let's try to challenge Rabbi bar Chana's halakha. It says in the Brisa, "Lo yashin adam mayim b'tzat koshel shel chaveirei." This is a direct contradiction to what Rabbi bar Chana said. Rabbi bar Chana said you're allowed to do it, and the Mishnah here or the Brisa here directly says you're not allowed to do it. So Rabbi bar Chana is ogeschlagen. What type of wall is such a problem? Because if it's made out of bricks, that's going to be susceptible to erosion due to the meraglaim. What if it was made out of rocks, not out of blocks? There, you don't have to be so far away because it's not so susceptible to damage. It's merely b'chtei shelo yazik v'chamo tefach. You don't have to be 1 tefach away. V'shal tzunma. We learned tzunma already. It's boulders that are kept together. So those are much more rigid and durable. Mutter there's no issue with meraglaim. But I'll call upon him. The first clause of this brisa that we quoted was lo yashin adam mayim b'tzat kosher shel chaveirei elim ken hirchak min gimel tefachim, like our Mishnah, and it's mufurish, not like Rabba bar Chana. So, and here you can't say it's speaking by of it by Shofkin, because it clearly says lo yashin adam mayim. It's specifically discussing one person relieving himself. So tomorrow tiyufto the Rabba bar Chana tiyufto. Because we are so clear, we have to say that Rabba bar Chana is obuk shloken. Fragt Gemara, but the problem is for Rabba bar Chana krokom. Rabba bar Chana quoted a pasuk where the Novi is saying that it's norm to have a mashtin v'kir. Zog to Gemara, that's not shot in the pasuk. Zog to Gemara, Hosam hachikamar afilu midi. The darkil ishtuna bikir, even things that do relieve themselves on the wall. That's not a human, like what you thought, Rabbi bar Chana. But even things that relieve themselves on the walls Lo shaviknalei. Your land is going to be so destroyed, everything will be destroyed. Umani ukalba. We're talking about the mashtim bekir in the pasuk, talking about a dog. And the Navi was telling Achav that you'll be so eliminated and so wiped out, there won't even be a dog remaining. And therefore, you have no right that a human, it's normal for him to be mashtim bekir. Amar Rav Tubi Bar Kisna. Rav Tubi Bar Kisna said, Amar Shmuel and Rav Shmuel. Rekik. Rekik is a thin type of cracker, like a pita. It's thin and it's an edible food item. The halacha is that if you have two rooms and they're sealed off from one another, and there's a mace in one room, the other room is not considered oil mace. There's no way for the tumah to get through. But if there's a window in between these two rooms or in between these two houses that connects them, and that window is a certain shear, tumah will go through that window. And there's different shiurim of a window depending on what the purpose of the window was. If it was for light, you would need a bigger shear. And if it was for utility, it would be a smaller shear. But whatever the shear would be, what if someone placed this rikik, a cake there? Would that be considered as something that reduced somewhat the opening? And now this hole no longer meets the threshold to allow the tumah to travel, to transit through it. So zokt Rav Tuvi Bar Kisna Amar Shmuel rikik, if it's just a little piece of pita, it wouldn't reduce the space. Why wouldn't it reduce the space? Rashi tells us because it's roy lachila. So you're not going to leave it there permanently, and now it's going to take up space and reduce the size of the window. You're going to take it away soon to eat. So therefore, it's not going to be bottled to the window, and therefore, we look like the window is still opened the full size. Frank the Gemara, my area rikik. What's happens to rikik? I feel ovanami. Even if it was a big, thick piece of cake, a whole loaf of bread, it's something that you're not planning to leave there. Zoktamar, of course. Lomi boy comer. We're saying a chiddush. Lomi boy ava. It's poshit. If it was a thick piece of cake, even the ichselay, since you see it and you're going to eat it, it'll be good to eat. Lomi vatla, you're for sure not going to be mevatlet, and therefore we don't consider that the window is being diminished. Avo rikik, but a thin little piece of pita, the mimis sitting there on the moist bricks, it's going to get icky, and you won't want to eat it. Maybe ema betule miftale. Maybe that a person would be mevatla. Once it's there, I'm not taking it away. So now it will become part of the wall, and it will reduce the opening. Kamash Malon, that no, you're not mevatlet, and you still plan to take it away and eat it, and therefore the window has still its full opening. Frank Gemara, I don't understand. Even if you were never going to take it away, it still shouldn't be choitzitz with that tumah, because v'teibeklei the havalei davar shu makabel tumah. It's a food product. A food product is makabel tumah. The whole davar shu makabel tumah ain't a choitzitz with that tumah. Forget the fact that you're planning to take it away. Even if you weren't planning to take it away, the fact that it's a food item will make that it will not prevent tumah from passing through, because anything that's makabel tumah could never be choitzitz with that tumah. And for the Gemara, maybe it's speaking about a pita that was not makabel tumah. Why won't it be makabel tumah? Because it never came in contact with one of the mashkin that any food product has to come in contact with before it's makabel tumah, which is yad shachadam, yayin, devash, shemen, kolo, al. The dal stands for dam, and the mem stands for mayim. So if it didn't come into contact with any of those, how did you make dough if it didn't come in contact with the mashka? Shenilis b'mei pears. You used apple juice. You used apple juice to knead this dough, and this dough never was hooked makabel tumah. So since it's something that cannot be makabel tumah, so then the whole criteria is: am I being mevatlet? Am I leaving it there, and therefore it will be chaytzis lefnei tumah because it diminished the size of the window, or do I plan on taking it with me eventually, and therefore it's not considered as having diminished the window? Kupa malaya tevin. What if you had a box that was full of tevin that was in this window and blocking the window? Or v'chavis malaya gregris. Or if you had a little jug that was full of pressed figs. hamunachin b'chaloim that are sitting in this window. Now, are they going to be mafsik for the tumah or not? So, Ryan, you have to analyze it. Kol she'ilu. Now, Rashi right away tells us we're assuming that these are not hukshel l'kabel tumah, because if they were, we have the same rule that anything that could be makabel tumah is not chaytz. So the assumption here is we're discussing teven or groigris that are not hukshel l'kabel tumah, they can't become tumah, and now we're discussing are you mavatal them to the window, are you not mavatal them? So what does the Brisa say? Kol she'ilu yinatlu. If you would remove the barrel, if you would remove the box, the yechoylin teven, the groigris, lamod b'fnei atzman, and the groigris and teven, they wouldn't just fall away and spill, they would still retain their shape and remain there. Then choytitzin, then they're choytitz b'fnei atuma, we say they're bottled there to the wall. But v'mlav ein choytitzin. The problem is, v'teven chazil b'hemta. This straw you can use to feed your behemoth. So who would be mavatlet? No one's being mavatlet. So if you're not being mavatlet, why is it that they're chaytitzim? And for the Gemara Basra, you know what type of teven we're talking about? Spoiled. If it's spoiled teven, you're not going to feed that to your behemoth. But for the Gemara chazi latina, I still can use the teven to make cement out of. And weiter, why would I be mavatlet? Why would I abandon it to remain in the windowsill? And for the Gemara Dispekutzi, you wouldn't be able to make cement out of it. Because the way they used to make cement is they would mix it with water and then they would stomp on it with their bare feet. The problem is it was full of thorns. So nobody's going to put it through that process. So okay, so I can't use it to make cement, but chazi lasaka, I could use it as firewood. Zaktamar b'masuna, it was moist, so therefore you wouldn't use it as firewood. But chazi lahasagada, you can use it as firewood in a very big fire, so it'll dry out and then it would become fuel. And therefore we say that you've abandoned it there, and it's bottled to the window, and it will be mamai from the window. Even if you have groigros that are not makabel tumah, because they weren't hochsher, but you could still use it in the future, and therefore you're not going to be mavatal them. So why is it that they're mafsek l'fnei tumah? Amashul b'shehitrifu. They're full of worms, so no one's going to eat them anymore. So that's why he's going to abandon them there on the windowsill. Let's analyze this case. We have these groigers that are in a chavis, right? So, what exactly is the scenario with this chavis? In what position is it lying? Either pumalavar, it has an opening to it, and it has the bottom. Which way is the opening facing? If the opening is facing the outside, and the bottom of this chavis, as it's lying down, is facing the room where the mace was, well, the chavis itself should shield and prevent the tumah from going through. Why? Zokt Rashi, Zokt the Gemara. We have to turn on to Daf Chaf Amud Aleph. Why do I need the contents of the chavis, meaning the groigres, to be chaytzitz l'fnei tumah? The jug itself will be chaytzitz l'fnei tumah, because kli cheres, we're assuming it's made out of cheres. Jugs are normally made out of cheres, and we know a kli cheres cannot become tamei if something touches the outside of it. Only if something touches the inside of it. So since the back of it, bottom of it, the sealed part of it, is facing the room where the mace is, tumah wouldn't get through there. The kli cheres ain't tamei migabot. Ella must be the puma lagav. So you have to say that this is a jug was facing the tamei room, so tumah can penetrate it, and that's why the only thing we could rely on to be mafsek fnei tumah would be the groigres, or be boyisem eloilam the puma lapar, even if it's facing the outside. So therefore, if it was a kli cheres, it won't allow tumah through. It was a metal chavis. A metal keli will become tamei even from the outside, and that's why the chavis itself was not able to contain the tumah. But the groigris inside, if you're mavatal them because they're wormy, then they would be mamai to tumah. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we were zeicher to finish Daf Chaf. Let's go back to Daf Yud. To Daf Yud, zeicher to finish Daf Yud Tes. I apologize. finished off your test. We're on Chafam and Aleph. We have 8 minutes. Let's go back for the benefit of those people who were in shul yesterday, where we also learned Daf Yutes, and we'll learn Yudches now. So I'm going to go now to Yud Zayin Omid Beis, because that's where we left off on Friday. Oops, that didn't work out good. Get the right Daf over here. Nope, that didn't work either. Do this again. One, two, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nope. I'm not sure why I'm not able to get it to go to the right Daf. Let's try this again. I see the problem. Oh, sorry. Okay, so on Yud Zayin Beis, which is where we left off on Friday, the Gemara had a discussion between Rava and Abaye. Our Mishnah talks about someone who wants to come along and make a bar, and there's already a bar on the other side of the property line that's 3 tefachim away from the border, from the property line. I want to make a bar. I got to distance myself 3 tefachim for the wall of my bar, and then I could dig my hole, meaning my hole is 6 tefachim away from my neighbor's hole. Rava and Abaye had a discussion as follows. What about the first guy? The first guy to come along, so there's no bar on the other side. Does he have to assume that his neighbor is going to make a bar, and therefore, when he makes his bar, he has to be pulled back 3 tefachim into his property line? Or since there's no other bar there, he can make it right on the edge. And the Gemara quoted a machlokes between Abaye and Rava. Abaye said, listen, my neighbor didn't make a bar, so I don't have to worry. I can make my bar right on the edge. Rava said, not so fast. He has a right to make a bar. Therefore, you're not allowed to make your bar right on the edge. You have to move back 3 tefachim, even though your neighbor didn't make a bar yet. The Gemara qualified your machlokes, and the Gemara said, the Gemara Tula shows, are we talking about a case where this field gets plenty of rainwater? So the norm is nobody builds boris. The whole purpose of boris is that you have some storage of water to water your field. But if you don't need to do that because there's plenty of rainwater, you're not going to do it. So there are those who say that's where there's a machlokes. You know where Abaye was makel and said you're allowed to dig your bar right up against the property line, where we know pretty sure that your neighbors are not going to want to build a bar because there's no need for it. There Abaye allows it. And even there Abaye allows it, Rava disallows it. Because at the end of the day, I have a right to make a bar there, and you don't have a right to come so close to the property line. But what if it was a case where you needed bars because it wasn't a field that got so much rain? Even Abaye would agree that you're not allowed it. That was one nusach. The other nusach that this machlokes was quoted in was the opposite way. If it's a case where no one's going to build a bar because you don't need a bar, even Rava agrees to Abaye that you're allowed to make it right on the property. However, if this property doesn't get so much rain and needs rain, so the assumption is that my neighbor will build a bar, that's where they're arguing. And even there, Abaye said that since I'm first, I can build my bar there now. Because the fact is, right now, you don't have anything there. So there's two nuschos of having the machlokes. The Gemara had a kasha on Abaye according to one lashon, because our Mishnah says, our Mishnah seems to indicate that it's speaking in a case where even the first guy has to stay away, because Abaye explained our Mishnah and said the second guy who makes his bar has to be 3 tefachim away from the koisel of the bar of the first guy. In other words, the first guy also needed a koisel of bar. In other words, the first guy also had to dig his bar 3 tefachim away from the edge. The first guy, according to Abaye, never has to be marchid. So how does Abaye explain the Mishnah that even the first guy has to be marchid? So for that, the Gemara said Abaye learns that our Mishnah is never speaking about a case where one guy came first. Because when one guy came first, he could make his bar without any harchakas. However, our Mishnah is speaking in the case where Reuven came, he's about to dig his bar, and who shows up right on the other side of the property line? Shimon. And they're both now about to dig together. That's where our Mishnah says that you have to be 6 tefachim apart. That's where we got up to on Friday, and now we're 7 lines from the bottom on Daf Yud Zayin on the base. Tashma. Sela habo biyadayim. This is a case that we actually just learned today on Daf Yotes. Sela habo biyadayim. What if the land that we're both neighbors on is very soft earth? You don't even need a shovel. You can literally scoop the earth up with your hand. Much softer earth, much more susceptible to damage. The Brisa tells us, Zeh chofer bayre mikan. He will dig his bar on one side. Zeh chofer bayre mikan. So this seems to indicate if one guy came first, he could dig his bar on one side, and if the other guy, and then when the other guy comes second, he'll dig his bar on the other side. But regardless, zeh marchik shloisha tvachim v'sad b'sid, v'zeh marchik shloisha v'sad b'sid. So you see over here, even though he came first, before the other guy came, he still has to be marchik shloisha tvachim and sad b'sid. According to Abaye, why not have to do anything at all? The first guy. And for the Gemara, Bava yadayim shiny. Maybe by a normal case of a bar, Abaye said that I don't have to be marchik. But we're talking about very soft earth where the damage is so much greater, because as it is, we're talking about compromised soil. There, even Abaye would agree that the first guy, in fact, has to be marchik. What would the Hamin to ask on Abaye from this brisa? It's pashut that you would require more precaution if you're dealing with very loose sand. The Gemara is similar to what we just learned on Daf Yotes. Baba Yadayim it's trichel. The chiddush of Baba Yadayim is so kadai the chamino even the Baba Yadayim liboy nami raf chatvei. I would have thought 3 tvachim is not enough. You might need more than 3 tvachim. Kamash Malon that 3 tvachim is enough even for Baba Yadayim. Tashma, I just want to get onto at least Daf Yud Chesam Al. Tashma marchikin es a gefes ves a zevel ves a melech. We're quoting from our Mishnah that says that if you have any of these items, you have to maintain a distance from the property line of your neighbor. So let's turn just onto Yud Chesam and Aleph. There's a melach, there's a sid, there's a sloim. All of these items have to be removed 3 tefachim away. Or you have to strengthen the wall of these items. Taima, the Mishnah once again says, I don't have to stay away from the property line. I have to stay away from the wall, which means it's only because there's already a wall built there that I have to stay away. If there's no wall there, there's just a property line. So this supports Abaye that the first guy there could build without any archaka. So it's going to be shver and rava. So Avada, our Mishnah holds like rava, and Avada, our Mishnah holds that even if there's no wall built, I still have to maintain my distance from the wall. So what is the point of the Mishnah then? Well, what is the Mishnah teaching us? The hanu that all of these items that become hot, they're all damaging to a kaisel. That's all the Mishnah wanted to teach us. Okay, it's already 52. We'll stop here at Hashem. I mean, at 9 o'clock. I'm going to learn the whole Daf Ches because unfortunately I made a mistake and I told Mintzberg to learn Daf Ches yesterday, so we'll learn Daf Ches at 9 o'clock. Okay, everyone should have a wonderful day, and we will learn Mishnah a little bit later.
Hi, Yosy. How was your trip?
Baruch Hashem, it was very nice. How was your trip? You had an even more interesting trip.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem.